Olson, theathletic.com. Sam Kahn earlier with his article on a series on recruiting, plus also the SEC, and we'll have quite a bit of that with Max, plus his story on Mike Gundy. Max, thank you. It's Craig and me. Today, Paul got married yesterday. Did you know that?
Did not get that invite, but congrats to Paul. That's fantastic.
It would have been expensive. It's in Hawaii. And so a nice little small group that was in Hawaii. And congratulations again to Paul and Amanda. Max, let's start with the SEC. What was your take, your thoughts, Texas, OU, the A&M, Arkansas, all these, with your thoughts about UT and Oklahoma and their first year in the SEC in 24?
Yeah, I mean, it's beginning to feel very real. I thought the schedule release was very interesting. I think they overall did a pretty good job of balancing everything out. And, you know, it is crazy when you start to look at some of these schedules. Like I just saw a post pointing out that, you know, that Kirby Smart and Georgia, I think they're playing Clemson as well in 24, in addition to I think to some pretty big time challenges here. Like I think Texas has got, you know, I think Texas ended up with probably a pretty favorable schedule overall. You kind of knew they were going to end up playing in College Station, obviously, for the first year of that. But you know, a lot of SEC East on their schedule, which is interesting. And then, you know, I think Oklahoma, like you look at that schedule and what they're up against, and man, got to make really big strides this year. And year 2 under Brent Venables, because this job is about to get a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, their schedule: Tennessee, LSU, Alabama, all on the same slate. Auburn, Ole Miss. I mean, and there, you know, obviously there's some mystery, like how good is Hugh Freeze in Auburn, and how quickly, and you know, where's South Carolina post Spencer Rattler and all that. But you know, it's like you wanted it, you got it, and how much, you know, transition time do you think these teams need, Max? You know, A&M slipped into the SEC pretty quickly and had Johnny Mania. Missouri won the East and was in the title game pretty quickly, and obviously things have varied since then. But are you expecting like a transitional period, or do you think both these programs can kind of jump into the deep end right away?
Yeah, you know, and I should have added, man, that A&M schedule sets up pretty well. Same deal there, honestly. If Jimbo Fisher can win enough games this year and get that thing on the right track, like I think you kind of like how that one turned out for them. Other than, you know, they've got a tough one with Notre Dame in non-conference, but you know, I think it's going to be a challenge. I do, and I'm not going to sit here and say, you know, Oklahoma and Texas are doomed to, you know, winning 7-8 games a year in the SEC. Like I think they will rise to the level of the competition over time, and I think that SEC status is going to help them overall in recruiting. I think it already is. But man, you just have to, like, especially like at the line of scrimmage and stuff like that. And that's one area where like they do recruit at a high level, but like ultimately I think developmentally it's probably going to be a little bit eye opening. O-line, D-line, some of those spots when you just week to week, what you see in the SEC with really, really highly ranked guys, on the other side of the field. And, you know, there's just not as many like weeks where you feel like you've got a huge edge over your opponent from a recruiting standpoint, like you kind of do in the Big 12. So, you know, I think that it's going to take time, and certainly for both of those programs, it's going to take stability with the coaching staff to be able to build something.
Max, they have that algorithm, whatever they did, to ensure the rivalries and also then the schedule. Alabama's playing Georgia in 24. Do you feel like this is kind of, I guess it's a little bit like, wait a minute, they've played 5 times in the regular season in the last 20 years. Do you feel like that all of a sudden popped up the ping pong ball because the college football playoff expansion starts in 2024? So, hey, let's let them play each other. It won't hurt if they lose.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, we all have to just like understand that like when you go to a 12-team playoff, like there's going to be, you know, 9 and 3 SEC teams that make the playoff, right? Like we just know that. So like it's okay to have tougher schedules from that standpoint. And I do think it's going to be a little bit weird, like where, you know, when you go away from divisions. I mean, I know other leagues have done it in recent years, but I think it is going to feel a little bit more strange with the SEC to really be tracking that 1 versus 2 in that league and no divisional standings, because we're just so used to, okay, in the East, it's going to be Georgia or Florida, Tennessee, and, you know, in the West, it's probably going to be Alabama or LSU or maybe somebody rises up. And so I think when you eliminate that, It's going to make for a little bit more random schedules, obviously, but it's also going to that race for the top is going to be, I think, really, really interesting, and makes a lot more games matter, I think, in the SEC race. But it also makes it okay to have some of those games that maybe you would save for Atlanta and do them in the regular season, because ultimately, if you're the SEC, if you're Greg Sankey, you feel pretty good that your 4 best teams in the SEC are probably going to make the playoffs.
Max, on a yearly basis around November, inevitably there's an article or a conversation about what we're missing out on with Texas and Texas A&M, and now after all these years, we're finally going to see it again. I can only imagine what type of atmosphere there will be in College Station, but on your anticipation level and just things we've seen recently in college football, where does that rank, the fact that we're going to get to see that resumed and now as a conference game, where does that rank amongst kind of your highest anticipation levels for certain college football games?
Yeah, I think if I could put in the credential request for that today, I would. Certainly I think a lot of people are going to be fighting to be in that press box that night. And, honestly, when you look at that game, and just the hatred that is built up from not playing each other over this decade and kind of constantly looking over the fence and comparing where you're at to where they're at and stuff like that. Part of me, not only am I excited for the game, but you kind of hope both of them are really good. You kind of hope that both of them are playing in a game that really matters, and it's not just one of them's 5-7. This doesn't really matter to anybody. I think it's. I think it'd be awesome if that is a game that is at the end of the season and has real stakes and has maybe one or both of them, trying to get into that expanded playoff.
Max, you wrote a long feature in depth with Mike Gundy, and I know last year the season kind of just fell apart. They had injuries. It seemed like there was also, I don't know what, inside the locker room. What did you learn from him?
It's funny. I got to sit down with Mike Gundy in late April for more than an hour in his office, and I think people would read the quotes and see him speaking very candidly and being maybe some of them read a little bit defensive and he's cursing and some of them like that. I'm sure somebody probably could read this and be like, man, Gundy is real cranky, but no, he was in a great mood. He just is, I think, at a point in his career as he approaches, 20 years of being a head coach almost. I think that Mike Gundy's at the point now, and he's said it a few times in our conversation, where he kind of doesn't care anymore. He kind of doesn't care what people think. He's going to say what's on his mind. He's going to say what he really thinks about what's going on. And, he's just not somebody at this point in his career who's going to do a whole lot of changing. I think that as much as I think he's intrigued enough by the challenges of the job, and the job has felt more challenging to him than ever before, even with how successful they've been. He's intrigued by enough of the challenges that he wants to keep doing it. He doesn't really, foresee retiring anytime soon. But certainly they went through a lot of challenges, whether it's injuries and on-field and leadership and stuff like that last year. And then at the end of the season, he was genuinely really shocked by some of the players that went in the portal, really didn't see it coming, and they've really had to kind of adjust their messaging and their recruiting a little bit in terms of the players they're bringing into their program. And, I think that his take on it is not, you would expect usually for coaches to be pretty introspective and say, I realize now there's a few things we've been doing wrong and we've got to fix it and stuff. Mike Gundy wants to double down and say, the culture is good here. The staff is good here. I don't fire coaches. We've got to fine tune things a little bit, but ultimately the Cowboy culture, as he calls it, is exactly what he wants it to be. And he's just got to find the right kind of players and try to be successful. But this is a guy that, as that's kind of what we wrote about. The college football has changed so much. Will he kind of change with it in order to kind of keep them in contention in the Big 12 and the playoff and all that stuff? I think the next few years are going to be very interesting for him as he adjusts to the portal and NIL and all these things that have made it really a lot tougher to sustain success. And
he is not going to change, as you pointed out. He basically is daring somebody to fire him if they want him to do it a different way, right? He's not hiding the fact that he understands that's a consequence that could come, but he's still going to do it his own way regardless.
Yeah, he's certainly at the point now where he's made a lot of money, and I think he's I think he's proud of he did it his way and has won more than 150 games there by doing it his way. And I don't think he's inflexible, but and he said, he had to hire a new DC this offseason, Brian Nardo. They had to go find a new quarterback. Like there's obviously a lot of change within their program going on this offseason. But certainly, yeah, Mike Gundy is going to keep kind of saying what he thinks and not really hold back like he did in our conversation. And he has a good relationship with his AD and his president. I don't think he's on the hot seat by any means. I think they really value what he brings to that program and that community and the continuity and the success that they've had for a very long period of time. I mean, this is one of only two programs in the country that has had 17 consecutive seasons of a winning record in a bowl game. They value him, but at the same time, Mike Gundy, I think, is at that point where he's just safe enough that he feels like he can kind of say whatever he wants, and he certainly in doing this job and moving forward, he's going to do things exactly the way he wants.
You mentioned that he was kind of caught off guard by a lot of the players who entered the portal. There were rumblings that there was turmoil, etc. Did he ever admit what really happened? And you said they're changing their philosophy and maybe they go about how they go about their business. Did he ever actually say anything about what actually happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like the argument he kind of made is that, look, this is a program basically full of men, and they're not always going to get along, and that kind of comes with it sometimes. And usually, he certainly stood by his coaches. He stood by Casey Dunn, his offensive coordinator, and didn't make a change there, even though Oklahoma State obviously lost a lot of receivers this offseason and stuff like that. I think he feels like their player leadership maybe wasn't quite what he hoped it would be last year. Obviously, there's a really veteran team in 2021 that played for a Big 12 title and won 12 games. And so you lost some really good seniors off that team, and it's kind of hard to fill the gap there a little bit. And I think he just felt like, there were some guys in their program like John Paul Richardson, who they love, who he's their kind of guy in every way, a 3-star guy that they took when A&M and others would and stuff. They made him a captain as a sophomore and stuff, and he ended up going in the portal over playing time basically. And they're just kind of like, well, what are you supposed to do? Like, you coach them hard. We're going to kind of stick to our guns here and how we do things. Coach them hard and try to build good relationships with them and their parents and stuff like that. But you still may end up losing them to the portal. They feel like that's just the reality of how it is nowadays. They're not going to get into bidding wars with anybody over players that are threatening to go in the portal or anything like that. I think he just feels like, I've just got to defend the culture here and, find guys that really want to be here for the right reasons and want to be coached hard.
So we've got Big 12 Media Days in about a month, and we got the email about starting to vote on the preseason team. And I just went in there just for the heck of it and started filling out some of the names that I know I'm going to have on there and started to kind of look into a little bit more of some other teams. And obviously you have the new 4 schools that create, a new issue.
Hey, who's our QB1 in that? Is it Jalen Daniels? Like, who's it going to be this year in the preseason?
I've got 4 spots that I have not filled out, and that's one of them. And I think I've heard mostly from just people here that I've asked. They went Jalen Daniels, but obviously, you could go, I guess, Quinn Ewers in theory. But, I mean, Daniels seems like probably the guy who's proven the most at this point. But I don't know. That's part of the questions, I think.
How many people?
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're good.
How many people will get caught up in the Quinn Ewers at least the second year around over Jalen Daniels at Kansas?
I would guess. I mean, that's obviously the Big 12 preseason one it's all voted on by media who cover the conference. I would guess a lot of people will write in Ewers without even thinking about it. Yeah, you're probably right about that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case too. But yeah, Daniels definitely. If he gets the nod, I would be totally fine with that, and it would be deserved. But it was weird because you have to start. I was like, oh man, I don't have anybody from BYU or Cincinnati on here. I got to get UCF on here somewhere. But then I was like, what do I do about I did not know what to think about Oklahoma State, just in general, much less individual players. After your conversation with Gundy, where do you see them kind of fitting in? Do you have any sort of a great feel on? They've made changes, obviously, but where do you see them in the pecking order for a team that was, an inch away from winning the conference just a couple years ago?
Yeah, and that's the thing is, have they lost too many good players to the portal, and how do you replace those guys? I actually think they got some pretty good ones out of the portal in this cycle to replace each of those guys. I think the Alan Bowman addition from Michigan, I think, is going to be really interesting, and offensively, I think they're going to go in a little bit of more of a different direction. I think you're actually going to see them try to pound the rock more and try to go under center a little bit more, which we haven't seen from there in a super long time. They still got some good players. I think Brendan Presley's setting up for a really big year at receiver. And Colin Oliver, the linebacker, he's got to adjust to playing in a 3-man front there. But I think, certainly one of the more talented pass rushers in the conference. Like, there's some guys still there that I think would be kind of in that all-conference consideration. But, what do I expect from them? I mean, like, I think that they're probably going to end up like they were last year. Like, you're probably just going to end up playing a lot of close games. I mean, that's just kind of that's just life in the Big 12. And I think that, they've got to be a lot better on the offensive line. They need to develop a run game. The running backs averaged 90 rushing yards a game last year, which ranked 119th in the country. Like, they just could not run the ball. And so then when you have injuries at quarterback, it really becomes clear they have a hard time moving the ball without Spencer Sanders last year. Defensively, with Brian Nardo coming over from Division II, like, it's going to be very interesting to see that they're trying to implement the Iowa State defense. I think they do to some degree have the personnel for that, but how easily does that click, and how many busts do you have with that stuff? Like, I think they're a team that, if they hit on a bunch of these transfers, will be in the conference race. But, to sit here and say they're going to win like 10 games, like, that would be surprising.
Max, I asked Sam Kahn this question. So we're at Big 12 Media Days, July, whatever it is, 11th or 12th, right? What will be what is more likely to be the case? The Pac-12 has a new deal, or the Big 12 welcoming in 4 new teams, and also the fact there might be somebody else in the future? Like
we have a big Coach Prime introduction at Big 12 Media Days.
Yeah,
you think is that on the table here?
I think he'll be on a cruise ship somewhere when that's going on. But yeah, you get what I'm asking.
I think that based on the misery I've gone through and having to cover this little realignment phase since the beginning of the year, or since last July, I think that cynically there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if the Pac-12 deal will even be done by the time Pac-12 Media Days happens.
Yep.
Man, I feel like they have to get something done here by the end of the month. But that's not really based on like great intel at this point on the Pac-12 side. It's been very quiet, and certainly they need to. I think it would benefit everybody if they told San Diego State what they were doing by the end of the month here in terms of the buyout for San Diego State. But if this thing drags into July, I think we're already kind of sick and tired of waiting for that thing to be wrapped up. So would be very interesting, and probably would be a lot of tension if that were the case. So I don't know, guys. I wish I knew with certainty. End of June is the deadline on the Pac-12, and with Colorado and Arizona. But sitting here today, it's really hard to tell.
Max, how old is your daughter?
I don't have a daughter.
I mean, your child. I'm sorry. I said
sorry. My son.
Your son.
He's 2.
Okay,
he's 2.
So you've had a Father's Day. Will this be the second or third Father's Day with him?
This is my second Father's Day.
So what does it mean to you that first one last year, but having that Father's Day?
My second or my third? I guess it would be this is my third. Yeah.
Well, the fact that you have that little one looking back up to you on Father's Day.
Yeah. Oh, it's the absolute best. I think obviously, like, we all work very hard in our jobs and this career, and it can be a grind nonstop and stuff like that. But it's been really great over the past couple of years here to try to have a better work-life balance and put him first and stuff like that. And he's he's been tremendous. Just a super fun kid who really brightens our day, and it's nice to ask. Yeah, it's looking forward to Father's Day, and it's been a fun journey so far.
Thank you, Max. Appreciate your time as always. Max Olson, theathletic.com, with us on 365 Sports. We'll have Ross Dellinger